Alright YouTube, what's going on? It's Ninja Chortle. I'm back with another update, a new custom. This time we've got Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, and a more comic book, also sexy, I mean you can see why, custom. So just to start off the bat, one of the reasons why I made this is because, you know, Hasbro doesn't make incredibly sexy, not blatantly sexy action figures anymore. Older Black Widow figures did have open cleavage like this, but you know, the older Hasbro figures aren't nearly as lovely and well made, and you know, they use different body parts, different hair. It was a different era back then, so they don't really do that sort of thing anymore. I mean, I hope you've noticed that over the last couple of years if you've been collecting, especially with not just the chest but also legs. They don't do a whole lot of sort of things like that. But I never owned one of those older Black Widows with the you know, whether it be the Hasbro version. I did have the original Black Widow from Toy Biz, but yeah, that one, got rid of that as soon as I could, getting a better Black Widow. But anyway, here we are. I made this not too long ago, and it's both very, very simple, and also, you know, you can already see two things that are making this a little bit more complicated. One of those things I'm talking about is her hair, obviously. But yeah, we'll get into it. Like I said, like with my other videos, I like to walk you through the process. If you wanted to make one yourself, I will let you know what parts came from where and what I did to achieve this figure, but I'm not going to do a step-by-step sort of thing or show you directly. It's more of these are the parts, these are the materials, and hopefully you know how to make customs yourself, and then you can just use this as a reference. And of course you can always make changes because it's your custom versus mine. Do whatever you want. If you don't know how to make customs at all and you want this figure for yourself, well, then you can learn just like I did by watching other YouTubers that do tell you how to crack torsos and switch legs and heads and hair and things like that. Because again, I learned from YouTube, so I'm sure you can too. So let's get into it. We're going to start from the bottom and go to the top like always. However, this one is not the most complicated bottom to top sort of showing, and they're the most standard kind of shoes. Nothing really special going on there. They're on almost nearly every single female figure, so it is what it is. Alright, so the majority of the rest of this figure comes from Black Cat. Now, of course, there is a Black Widow that pretty much is this. I will show you that later, but I didn't use that to make this figure. So specifically, I used the legs, the lower legs, the knees, the thighs, the hips, and the torso all came from a Black Cat, the all new, all different, or whatever they call this costume, Black Cat. Now, it's not a straight swap or just putting things on there, because this black plastic is kind of like a charcoal color. It's not exactly black, where I just took the pieces here. I did do a light sanding and then painted it flat black. So it has a deeper, richer black than what this is. This is totally fine though if you don't even want to bother painting things. You can just use this Black Cat figure and then it will cut down on a lot of painting. As far as the points, like the pins, I should say, that are on the legs, I didn't bother sanding them. I didn't bother paint them. I mean, they're essentially black, so why even bother doing all of that for the Black Cat or Black Widow anyway? So those are still the same color as the pins on Black Cat. If you want to use other pins from the other figures that are black, you know, do whatever you want. This is your figure. But yeah, everything from torso down comes from this Black Cat figure, and just repainted it black. Alright, next up we have specifically two parts, well, yeah, two parts that came from this black Emma Frost Walgreens exclusive, and that is the arms. So the arms are black plastic, like actually black plastic, and they were just taken right off of a Walgreens Emma Frost. I have a million of these. I say this before. Every time I use parts from Emma Frost, I will tell you I have quite a few of these. But the arms, The only thing that needed to change is that this flesh tone that's on her wrist, I took that off, you know, acetone, nail polish remover, took that off, and it still had a little bit of residue. It actually took some of the black coloring off of the forearms, so I did paint each of her forearms black plastic, but the biceps and shoulders are the exact same. Did not even touch those at all. Now the wrists, or I should say the hands, actually came from the Deadly Origins Black Widow, the white one that's the Target exclusive that apparently is no longer available in stores, which is very depressing. I use it for a lot. But yeah, all of, not only the hands but also pretty bangles here and the belt all come from the White Widow, which I'm going to grab right now. So that figure is obviously the same as this. I mean, it's essentially, you know, I use the exact same head, so it's not even any difference there. They're not all that different. It's just she has the chest open here and she doesn't. So it's just zip down a little bit and zip down a lot. That's the idea. So yeah, the hands came directly from this Widow, and then so did the bangles and the belt. Only difference with the belt is this has the red symbol on it with a little, like a silver color going around it. I used the exact same belt from this Widow and ended up removing all of that and then starting all over. So there's a gold, just the regular gold color that is the plastic. And then I painted my own symbol on there that's red by hand. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And yeah, we're done with all of that. Like I said, it's the same head, but also the hair came from the Emma Frost. So it's the exact same hair. Painted red, and that's just straight up red from the what you call it, the Angelus. I don't know why I forgot the name of this. Angelus red leather acrylic paint. So it's just straight up red. I actually was contemplating using a different color, which is I think it's called Scarlet Red. I use that on a different custom that I will talk about very soon. Yeah, in great detail, and I like the way it looked on that hair. But then I was going to, because this hair is blonde initially, so I was going to do a base coat of red to help bring out the color, and then do another coat with the Scarlet Red or change something up. But when I did that base coat of red, I was like, damn, this looks freaking good just like that. So yeah, look at the difference. This is how Hasbro made their red compared to the red that's on mine. This has got, you know, the wash on it, and it looks good, but I like my red a lot more. So I was actually thinking about repainting this one to be the same color red as that. Not the most necessary thing in the world to do, but maybe. Also, the guns are the exact same that came from the White Deadly Origins Black Widow. Why change something? If it's not broke, don't fix it. I just didn't give her the whole rifle thing, so yeah, that's it. And now for the feature, I guess is the best way to put it, the open cleavage. So that, surprisingly enough, came from this here Dazzler. If you watched one of my last videos, that is the original Miss Marvel costumed Carol Danvers video that went up not long ago. You would know that I said specifically I used the lower torso on that figure, but then I still have the upper torso from the same figure that I scrapped and decided to use it on this here Black Widow. One thing that you do not have to do is use this upper torso on your Black Widow if you're going to make one. Normally I would use, if I was going to have a figure with, you know, a bust like this, I would use a Lady Deadpool or use a Shikla. They have the exact body measurements, pretty much similar chest as this. But one, again, I wanted to make use of this because I bought it specifically for that Miss Marvel. So I had an extra upper torso. I wanted to make use of it. Secondly, there is some interesting detail in here, which is pretty cool. I ended up sanding off some of it, but you can see that this is actually sculpted on in there. So her shirt or her top, this part is sculpted on. So there's not just painted on the flesh tone. There's actually sculpted parts. I did try to sand that off. Actually, I didn't really need to per se. But you know, her entire back is black, so it's not really going to make sense to keep that sculpted part there. So I did sand that off the best I could. One interesting thing that I didn't realize, I thought that this collar was just glued on, and yeah, it is glued on, but there's actually, it goes into the plastic. So there's actually holes that go as a line that go all the way up from, you know, from the chest all the way, well, all the way from the bottom of the breast all the way up to her neck. There's just a big line that goes down in there. So it, for me, I needed to fill that in because obviously I was actually initially going to try to use this extra black or white piece to make the collar that goes around her neck. That didn't work out. So all of that was just scrapped. So I took Epoxy Sculpt first, and let's get in closer a little bit. And I took Epoxy Sculpt first to fill in those holes, so that way it would be a, you know, filled in chest, and then Epoxy Sculpt going around the neck to make the collar. Because again, I was initially going to use this collar on Dazzler, but it just didn't work out. It doesn't shape perfectly, so ended up just making my own collar, and it goes all the way around the back. If you can focus for me, but yeah, it goes all the way around the back, and there you go. And I actually really like how it worked out, and then it doesn't really get in the way of the hair per se. So it's really the hair that keeps her from looking all the way up anyway, not the collar. But it still works out pretty darn well. And then this, if you're wondering what the heck this is, I was trying to emulate a zipper. So I wanted it to be like, you know, a zipper just on both sides. I wish I, made it a little bit thinner. It looked fine at the time, but I wish I made it a little bit thinner. And then two, I painted it silver. And either I wish I primed it first, or I wish I used a different paint. I've had two issues with silver. I'll talk about that in another video, but I had two issues with the silver paint. I mean, one on this figure, and then on the other one, it just kind of doesn't show up very well. It's actually painted silver. The Epoxy Sculpt turns gray, but I did paint it silver, and it did look kind of metallic, but I don't know if the Epoxy Sculpt just absorbed it, or when I went to put the finish on there, it rubbed off, or it just doesn't even look like I painted it at all, really. It looks the same gray color as it was as Epoxy Sculpt, but oh well, that is what it is. But another reason, you might just want to use a Lady Deadpool or Shikla body instead of using this one to doing all that work. One, because, you know, avoid the work, but two, it's hard to see a little bit, but in the inside there's a lot of bumps and grooves in there, even though I sanded it as flatly and as smoothly as possible. Because there's sculpt there, it's not plastic, it's not molded that way, so those holes are filled in with the Epoxy Sculpt, and it's kind of just like a bumpy little mess in there, on the, you know, open parts of where her chest is. So you can avoid all of that if you just use Lady Deadpool or Shikla. But that is it. Let's do a little bit of comparing of Black Widows before we go. Alright, and for a Black Widow comparison, we have our Retro Wave Black Widow with my custom Black Widow, then the modern Black Widow that came with the bike, and then Deadly Origins Black Widow. So because I did some modifications to these, you may not recognize everything, but I'm actually going to point those things out because I started doing those like a year ago, well before I actually fully made customs and before I started making videos. So I'm going to start with modern Black Widow here. One of the things that I did is, one, she got guns, because I don't know why Black Widow is sold without guns, but Hasbro did that. They gave us a Black Widow with a motorcycle and no guns. I actually have no idea where these guns came from, but they're a matching set, and they look awesome with this. And another thing, also I went with the short hair version because that's how modern Black Widow looks. And then these like gun holster straps or what have you, that came directly from the Domino figure, because I totally scrapped a whole ass Domino when learning how to make customs, and then I just took that extra piece, and she's been displayed like this for like a year now, and I really love the way she looks. Going to Retro Widow, using the other head sculpt that came with the modern Widow. I'll put it on the Retro Wave Widow so she doesn't look like Mary Jane, at least like the old Mary Jane, because I don't use that head anymore either. But yeah, this is what that Retro Widow's hair looked like, and her face relatively looked like that too. But that's the only thing that I did with that. She actually doesn't have guns either. She did come with them, but I don't like those guns. But for the most part, I might put those back on her. And that's about it. That's how they compare. Keep note that, again, this was Black Cat, and the plastic on that was like a charcoal black. And so this is what black paint looks like versus black plastic on these both. And one more obligatory comparison, we have my custom Black Widow with all of the MCU versions that I own of Black Widow. We have Avengers Infinity War Black Widow, Captain America Winter Soldier Black Widow, Avengers Endgame Black Widow, and Black Widow movie Black Widow. So haven't done any real modifications. This is just to show off everything that I own. So one thing that I will note, one, I haven't used this head sculpt, which came with the Winter Soldier Black Widow. I haven't used it yet, but I will be planning on reusing all of my extra. Again, this is the Black Widow from Endgame, which is just the same thing as Black Widow from Infinity War, but changing the head sculpt and taking off the green vest. That's it. But I'm going to start using this body mold, the Endgame, or excuse me, the Infinity War Black Widow body mold, to remake Winter Soldier Black Widow, and hopefully also make a Age of Ultron Black Widow out of it, because for the most part it's not the exact same body mold. I mean, everything has changed. These breasts were much bigger, and everything is much different. She's a lot skinnier in this one. Her shoes are very small. Her legs are very small. Her breasts are bigger, and then they have better the old plastic that they use in head sculpts and stuff like that is not nearly as good as what they use nowadays. So I'm planning on using this head, the Infinity War head, and redoing Winter Soldier, and I'll just use the same hair. And then I'm going to use this one probably to do an Avengers movie Black Widow, using again the same body mold, and just changing the paint around so it's more specific to those individual movies. Obviously here she's got the shield symbol on her arm, so that's something that I'm going to try to use decals and put those on, so when I do it, it'll look pretty good as opposed to me hand painting it. It won't look nearly as good if I hand painted it. But yeah, using extra body molds for that to make at least Infinity War, no, excuse me, at least Age of Ultron, and attempting to do a new Winter Soldier and possibly Avengers. And who knows, maybe if I find some good hair, try to do Iron Man 2, her first appearance. And then there's Civil War, which she didn't really wear this technically in the movie. She has that jacket with the jeans, and I do plan on doing that. Also, I would use the same head, and then actually using the Retro Wave Black Widow's hair would be literally perfect, because that's exactly how her hair was in the movie. Yeah, that's the whole plan. So look forward to seeing those here on the channel in the not terribly distant future, but it will take me a little bit of time to get things together. Anyway, that is it. Back focus on the main star of the show, my new custom sexy Black Widow comic book version. She doesn't wear this very often. She doesn't do this very often. Oh, one quick note about the hair, I actually forgot. So in general, the hair again comes from the Emma Frost Walgreens exclusive. Normally with something like this where the Black Widow head is actually smaller than the head for the Walgreens Emma Frost. So this head does not fit the hair perfectly. So normally I would add Epoxy Sculpt to make the head bigger in this case, so that it would fit the hair just right and then glue it in. However, I forgot to do that when I was messing around with Epoxy Sculpt and sculpting things, and it was kind of last minute. So what I normally do in most heads, when you take the hair off, there's notches that are in the hair, and then there's open notches that are sculpted in to the scalp, to the head, so that way they have a perfect fit, and it's usually specific to each head and each hair, so that it's not like a universal fit. But normally then when I take the hair off, I'll cut the notches out of the hair so that it's smooth on the inside, like a round, and then I'll add Epoxy Sculpt to the to the head, so that that's also smooth, so I can just make it more universal, a round piece fitting a round piece instead of putting like a square peg into a circle hole. You know, it doesn't work out. So making two round pieces, and that's how I would swap hair normally. But I forgot to do that, and so in this case I did cut the pieces out of the hair, and last minute I took some of that extra piece that I cut out of the hair and glued it back in, but I did it horizontally instead of vertically how it normally is, so it created a bigger bump in the back of her head. You can't see it because again it's on the inside, and you know it's glued in there, so I'm not taking it out, but it went horizontally, and so it just created a bigger bump to make her head bigger. So that's glued in there, and then I glued her head onto this hair. It's not perfectly glued either because I didn't really wait very long to let it dry, but it's on there good enough, and everything just went tumbling down, but it's on there good enough that it's okay, as long as I don't continuously take her head off, which I literally have no reason to do that now. Yeah, it should be fine. Also, one last note, I did paint this flesh tone on her chest compared to the chest color that's actually on the Dazzler, so it's a lot different. I mean, different enough that it's worth just noting that it is painted. It's not perfectly matching this head. I did my best, but it's close enough that it works. So I guess she went sun tanning and left her chest open, but covered up her face because she didn't want extra tan marks, tan lines on her face. Something like that. It's kind of how this head was made, kind of, for this body, but they have two different flesh tones. Whatever. But yeah, that's it. See you guys next time. I got more videos on the way, more customs on the way, a lot of things to work on. So make sure you subscribe to this channel if you want to see more of my customs, and I can walk you through everything. If you have questions or comments, just make sure you leave it down below. You can check out my live stream where I work on these customs on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/ninja_chortle. That is all that I do on that channel. I paint, I sculpt, and we talk about comics, games, anime, whatever. Come hang out with your boy, and I will see you next time.